A lot of my videos about Ashes of Creation have focused on one aspect of the game and got into a lot of the details. I thought I would do something different this time and look at the bigger picture, essentially a crash course. Now, there are a lot of videos like this out there already, but the way I am distinguishing this one is I want to walk through what I think the experience of a new player on launch day will be like. It is great to talk about all the systems, but this is an attempt to see how those systems will work together. Of course, this game is still years away, and to accurately depict the experience of a new player is difficult, but for those that want an introduction to Ashes, for those still on the fence, this could be a unique perspective that could aid your decision making and help you to determine if this game will be right for you. It is not a video that makes any bold claims that Ashes will be the best game ever. It just tries to lay out the game in an objective manner for what I think it is shaping up to be. I wanted to try to do this in one video, but that video would probably be way too long, as explaining all the major systems in Ashes takes too long and my longer videos always do poorly, so this is going to be a series of videos. I'm going to make this from the perspective of the average MMO player, so a more casual player but one that has some MMO experience, not the hardcore and not the completely uninitiated. Though if Ashes has an outstanding tutorial, then the experience of a new MMO player could easily resemble the experience of the average MMO player. So the first thing players will do is select a server. Servers will have a 10,000 player cap, and there are no mega servers, so server choice matters. With the popularity of this MMO, there could easily be hundreds of servers at launch. After logging into the server, players will choose their race, gender, primary archetype, and use the character creator to change their appearance. The character creator in Ashes is shaping up to be the best we have seen in an MMO. For race, you have 9 choices. There are 4 base races: Ayla humans, Dunes and Kel dwarves, Kaivek orcs, and Pyrian elves. Each of these base races has 2 secondary races underneath them, and then you have the Tolnar, the Underrealm race. There are no gender-locked races or classes in Ashes as well, so gender is purely aesthetic for your player model, but it also can change the aesthetics of nodes, the biggest feature of Ashes, and one we will get into in much greater detail later. Your primary archetype choice is a permanent choice. You can choose from one of 8 primary archetypes: Bard, Cleric, Fighter, Mage, Ranger, Rogue, Summoner, and Tank. Bards are support class, Clerics are healers, and Tanks are tanks. Summoners are a bit of a hybrid, but we don't know many details about them. At level 25, you can choose a secondary archetype from these same 8 archetypes, which augments your primary archetype and forms your class. While this game advertises 64 classes, in reality, the secondary archetype just augments the primary archetype. The secondary archetype does not add any new skills to your kit, it just gives you augments to your existing skills. So really, this game has 8 classes that are highly customizable. There are many other forms of augments in this game besides your secondary archetypes, such as social organizations, religions, and possibly race. All of these will not be available immediately, other than maybe some of the racial augments. We will get into those as they become available later on. Once your character is created, this is where normally a tutorial would start. Now, my idea for the tutorial is to have it be an instance zone that happens before you actually go through the portal to Verra. It could be on the world of Sanctus, which is the world players are leaving via portals to return to Verra. Due to the complexity of the systems in this game, an interactive tutorial that goes over the major systems and how players can progress would be very useful. I may do another video on what I would like to see in a tutorial in the future. For this video, I'm going to introduce systems as they potentially would appear in the world of Verra, even though they may have experienced them in the tutorial already. So players will get to choose one of 4 starting locations in Verra. Each of the starting locations is called a Divine Gateway, one for each of the 4 base races. Players are not locked to a Divine Gateway based on race, however. They can still choose to go to any of the 4 portals for their start. After zoning in at one of these locations, each of these locations has 2 separate starting areas, one for each secondary race. Now, players will quickly be introduced to a feature that is different in this MMO from other MMOs. There are no markers on quest givers, but I suspect early on in the starting area there will be some degree of handholding that helps players get through the first few levels and into the rest of the game. In Alpha 1, for instance, as soon as you logged into the game, you were given a quest to talk to Sergeant Landry. This was the first quest and gave you your first kill quest after you talked to him. Now that you have your first kill quest, you will experience combat for the first time. Now in Alpha 1, you initially just had your primary weapon skill to start, but you quickly unlocked other abilities as you leveled up. The standard way every MMO ever has done it in order to slowly bring people up. As for a brief overview of what combat in Ashes is, it is intended to be a hybrid tab and action system. Players can choose to slot up to 75% of their abilities as tab or action depending on the preference. It is still unknown about how a lot of this will work. If you want to know more about the combat, I have a video I did talking about the pros and cons of the design vision for Ashes of Creation's combat, and some videos talking about the combat update we just saw, and I will likely do more breakdowns as we get more combat updates. It is a hot topic right now, and for a long time it has been a hot topic. I'm still on the skeptical side of how Intrepid is going to pull off this hybrid system. But if I start talking about combat, this video will never end and we have a long ways to go. So players will experience combat for the first time and turn in their first quests, awarding them some experience for the kills and the quest. You may experience the looting and loot tagging systems as well during this first kill quest. Tagging of mobs in Ashes is based on a percentage of the damage done, with the person dealing damage first getting a 5 to 10% bonus modifier. Whoever deals the most damage, including the modifier, receives the loot from the kill. Experience from mob kills works differently. It is strictly percentage based. If the mob gives 100 XP and I do 50% of the damage, I get 50 XP. For groups, there is a scaling modifier that ramps up to a max of 1.3 to 1.4x per party member added to this XP number. That is then split evenly amongst the group members. So let's say your group does all of the damage to that same 100 XP mob. If your party is at the max party size of 8, let's say you get the max XP modifier of 1.4x. So the mob would then give the party 140 XP that would be split evenly among all 8 members. So each party member would get 17.5 XP. Loot tagging works the same in groups as well. If your group does the most damage, including the first hit modifier, your group gets the loot that is then subject to the group loot rules, which would follow the standard MMO looting rules such as need before greed and master looter. You may also experience the hunting certificates for the first time. This is a different loot system that is more realistic than what a lot of MMOs use for their loot system. Instead of a wolf dropping gold, you instead get a pelt that can then be traded in at a hunter NPC in nodes for gold. This gold amount will vary dynamically based on the distance from the node the certificate was collected and the amount of certificates that are being turned in at that location. Turning in these certificates at faraway nodes via the caravan system could multiply the gold received by 4 to 5x. Nodes and caravans are features we will explore in more depth once the player gets to his first node location later on. Besides certificates, mobs also drop crafting materials, and they will have a small chance to drop items. The first few character levels will likely be achieved pretty quickly, but the max level of this game is level 50 and is said to take 45 days of playing 4 to 6 hours per day. Now, I have another video where I discuss casual versus hardcore MMO players, where I discuss the average hours per day of the average MMO player. There are not many recent studies, but there are some older studies that show a rough estimate of 3 hours per day being average. This is 40% less than the 5 hours per day number, so in theory it should take 40% longer in terms of days as well. So the average MMO player is looking at 72 days to hit max level with the 3 hour per day number. So a much longer leveling curve than most modern MMOs, more in line with some older MMOs. So that is where we will end this first video. We still have not left the starting area. In game, I think the starting area will not take long to complete, but explaining each concept in depth takes some time. In the next video, we should get to our first node, at which point we start to see the big feature that really distinguishes this MMO from other MMOs, especially most modern MMOs. If you haven't seen them yet, there are 2 videos of mine that might be worth watching, my video on the map and my video on Intrepid's design vision for combat. Both would be a good lead-in to the next video in this series. With that, if you liked this video, consider subscribing, and I will see you in the next video.